I didn't know if you guys want to do a quick introduction or if we should just jump right in. Oh, Shawn, are you ready?
Absolutely, Kim. Lead us off. Tell us why we've gathered here to this evening.
Yes. So thanks everyone for attending, and thank you to the BCPC for having us today. We are in a little bit of a delay for those of you who are watching on YouTube, so we will be asking questions, and then Shawn and I are going to try and talk for a second to give you time to put things into the chat so that we can then read those back and be sure that we answer everything. We like it to be as informal and community driven and participation as much as possible. So be sure and put some questions that you have into the chat at any point whenever you want. And so I'm Kim. I was Kim Spikes. I was in Post for 15 years in New York City, and I continue to be a board member of the Post New York Alliance and am a co-founder of their sustainability committee. And I partnered at Post Factory, for those of you in New York who are familiar with the company. And then we merged into SIM about 5 years later. And then after that, we merged into Streamline Media. And so for 15 years, I had quite a ride of going from one of the smallest mom and pop shops in Manhattan to one of the largest ones in the world. And that is to say that I understand the stresses that people have in the industry, the ups, the downs, and the resilience needed over time. And I know these are very unprecedented times and a little bit different than what we've been dealing with in the past. So we thought it was important to come and share some tools and stuff that we have learned over the years, and hopefully they can be helpful for you as well. And I'd like to also introduce you to Shawn Chrisman.
Hello, everyone. And to follow up Kim's introduction, so Shawn Chrisman, I'm a therapist. I am a relationship coach, writer, professor, wear a few different hats, and come together with Kim to put together the company of Ethos, which I think you'll explain a bit more.
So Ethos, our company provides other companies with workshops and coaching, and our idea is to help build the individuals and the teams. And we discuss everything from, like today, resilience to imposter syndrome, different working styles that people may have, how to have the best communication between teams, and kind of your overall work presence. Harvard found that 85% of career success would come from your soft skills. So everybody thinks it's the hard skills and what you know how to do on the job, but ultimately your success is going to come with how well you communicate and get along with others. And it's worth noting that we are going to offer people a free coaching session. If you want to take us up on that, there will be a QR code at the end, so you can check that out. And you can try a session and see if it's a good fit for you. And you can come with anything that you want. It can be something that's going on at work, maybe something that you want to aspire to do, goals, or just kind of dealing with stress that you might be having right now. So we're going to start with where anxiety lives in our body. So there's often a disconnect for everyone of our mind and our body. And I know I can compartmentalize like a pro, and I'm sure a lot of you guys can as well. I did it so well that I didn't really notice stress. People would be like, oh, you're stressed. And I'm like, no, I don't feel it. Like, I'm fine. But I experienced stomach aches a lot in the morning before I went to work, but I wrote that off as like, just I didn't feel well in the morning. Then I had them at work, especially on days when I had to do a lot of public speaking or presentations or clients were coming in, but I kind of wrote that off too, as like, oh, it was my coffee. It was because I didn't eat lunch. Everything had a reason. I went to the doctor and she opened up my chart and took a quick glance, and she was like, wow, how stressed out are you? And I'm like, oh, I'm totally fine. Why? And she's like, okay, let me ask it a different way. What's going on in your life? And I'm like, okay, the company I work for was acquired. My position changed. We're building out edits and theaters and a bunch of other stuff. We hired a new team. We lost several people recently. And my dad had a major stroke a couple weeks ago. And she was like, oh yeah, that doesn't sound very stressful. You must be fine. And then she told me that the best thing to do was to exercise more. And that was a little maddening because at the time I was running a marathon. So that month, and I'm like, there is no more exercise that can be had at this point. So I was just like, whatever, I'm sure it'll be fine. And then I had my wake up call, which I had a bit of a feisty call with, or spicy call with my boss. And at the end of it, I had a migraine, which I don't really get very often. And when I get them, they're visual. So it totally, I couldn't see at all, completely overtook my vision. And it was the first time I saw stress, and 100% within minutes led to like a physical thing that happened to me. And I always thought of stress as being, like I can't breathe or something like that. I didn't realize it was like a migraine, and it was my stomach aches, and it was all these other things that were happening. So my doctor was right. And I realized that I need to pay attention to it. So I started to learn about kind of checking in and knowing that my body is telling me a lot more about my mental state than I gave it credit for. And so like now is a good example. If public speaking can make you nervous. So an easy technique that I have to see kind of where I am during the day is putting my 2 fingers on my palm and just rubbing it gently. And when I'm in a unstressed, very comfortable, like on the beach, on vacation, it tickles almost when I do it. When I am highly stressed out, like when I'm driving on the freeways, I can't feel it at all. So I'm just like, there is a notable difference for me right there. And it's just an easy way for me to gauge where I am if I'm having a hard time kind of figuring it out on my own. So, I think what I want to do now is really help everyone connect for a minute to their bodies and really see if you're paying attention to the clues that might be in front of you. So I encourage everyone, even though I can't see you, to close your eyes and for a minute, think about something recently that caused you some stress. Nothing traumatizing. Like we're just looking for something small that very manageable for this exercise that came up for you. And I'm going to give you a moment to really kind of get back right into that time and what was going on. And so as you're sitting there in the moment, we're going to kind of scan and see where things might be coming up for you. So in your head, maybe you get like a small headache immediately, or you have a real lack of focus. It's very hard to pay attention to what's going on. Some people get a very chaotic mind, and it can feel like noise. Maybe you notice that your jaw's clenched. Some people feel a tightness in their throat. I often realize now that I get a sore neck, so I'll have a tendency to always be rubbing on it throughout the day. I think everyone here can kind of pay attention. Are your shoulders up around your ears right now, or are they like down in a relaxed position? Are you maybe holding your breath? Some people will take deep breaths to kind of catch up throughout the day. And posture is a really good indicator. You kind of have that caved in protective posture in this moment that you're thinking about, or maybe you're more aggressive in your stance. Your chest could be tight, another common one. Or like I had a lot, you could have a stomach ache, or even that sensation of kind of butterflies that's going on. I'll give you a second to think about that. Okay, you can open your eyes and turn back on your camera if your camera was off. Put in the chat right now what you were feeling about the moment that you were thinking about, what you maybe noticed that you hadn't noticed before. And Shawn, while they're putting those in, are there any common ones that you have?
What research says is that the number one place often people may hold stress or distress, we may call it anxiety, we may call it a few different things, is typically in our gut. So the idea of a stomach ache or maybe some tension in the gut area is where many people feel it. We can also feel it in multiple areas, so we're not limited to just one. We may feel it in our shoulders, or may feel it a lot of tension held in the neck. So it can vary by person. Definitely slowing down and making that connection of what am I feeling and where I might be feeling it.
Yeah. So the stomach is good. It should have been my first indicator. Okay. So these are the ones that we just talked about. And then another big question is, okay, so you have a lot of stresses going on in your life. How do you deal with stress and anxiety when it comes up? You know, a lot of people that I know, exercise seems to be very helpful. I have several friends who will go doom spending, spend a ton of money. Creative activities are a big one. Drinking or smoking. I know that can be one that people fall into really quickly. Socializing with friends and family, being in nature is amazing. And Shawn, I guess I'll ask you, like, what are something on this maybe not on this list that you like to do when you're feeling anxious?
Feeling anxious, yeah. Breathing, again, is a very common one. When we are anxious or in a lot of distress, we tend to breathe much shallower than we would when we're calm, relaxed. And so noticing what we're breathing, this just tends to be a very accessible check-in. Like, okay, am I taking full deep breaths? Is it coming to me easily, or do I find like I'm almost to the point of hyperventilating or really rapid, shallow breaths? So I'd say number one for me is breathing, and then other things might just be grounding techniques where I might notice things in the room. We might have a favorite couch pillow or some texture that we really like that just kind of soothes us when we're in those really heightened moments.
Yeah. And this is another one I'd love for you guys to put in the chat, kind of how you deal with this throughout the day. I'm a big fan of pets. So being around animals is definitely a stress reliever really quick. And it's nice when you get home and they're so happy to see you. So that's also a really good one. So next, we're going to talk a little bit about these 4 zones. And essentially, this is from Harvard Business Review. And they had identified 4 different ways that you can feel during any given day at work. And they put them into zones, and it's, you know, performance, survival, burnout, and renewal. And today we're going to discuss the zones and focus on self-regulation and the ability to really sit with your emotions in a calm and skillful way in the face of kind of anything that's coming up for you. And the more aware you are and accepting essentially of where you are at with your feelings, the calmer and more deliberate you can be about how you show up. And so to go through these really quickly, the performance zone is when your energy is very high or high and you feel positive. It's where you want to be when you're working towards a goal and you feel upbeat, you're engaged, you're challenged, and feel optimistic. Now, the survival zone is when your energy is high, but you're feeling negative. And so that's low. When you feel threatened or devalued, we shift into fight or flight mode, which Shawn's going to talk about a little bit more here in a minute. And people in this zone are typically anxious, they're impatient, irritable, fearful, and can often be pretty self-critical in those moments. The burnout zone is when your energy is low and your feelings are negative. So people in this zone feel helpless. They can feel empty and exhausted. And I know a lot of people in the industry who have felt kind of burnout even before COVID, even before the strikes, because it's just, you know, you're running so high on that energy level in the performance zone for so long that it can tip really fast. And ideally, you would want to go into the renewal zone after having a high performance, which is when your energy is low but positive. So this is when you are recharging, you're getting ready to get back into performance zone. You may feel tranquil, serene, mellow, and kind of peaceful during this stage. And the key to sustaining high performance and well-being is to move regularly and deliberately between the performance zone and the renewal zone. So you need that downtime to recharge your batteries. You can't stay in overdrive and this really high energy level for super long periods of time. So ideally, you'd be in these 2. Now today, because of everything that's going on, a lot of people are going to be more in survival and burnout. And you know, it is very common to feel multiple. You could go through all 4 of these over and over in one day, depending on what's going on. But we'll focus on those 2 for the rest of the time. And really, just right now, if you could put which zone you're currently in, if it's performance, survival, burnout, or renewal. And Shawn, which zone are you in right now?
Probably a bit of all four. I think in the last few hours, I've kind of cycled through all four of these. So, and I think that's important to note is that what zone you may find yourself in does not have to be semi-permanent to permanent. It's making sure that you have those ways or tools to figure out how to move yourself into a different zone.
Yeah. Well, are you ready to drill down into these?
Yeah, we'll do a quick run through. So when looking at what zone we may be in, we often look at a couple of categories to help gauge or assess. So we might look at relationships. How are we doing in our relationships? Could be friendships, work relationships, romantic relationships. Are we finding it easy to connect with other people? Are we isolating more? Is there increased conflict or reduced perspective taking in those relationships? Some of the behaviors, are they consistent, or have things felt more impulsive lately? Like our need to self-soothe has dramatically increased, or participating in vices or maybe unhealthy behaviors has ballooned due to the stressors and circumstances around us. Decision making, are we finding ourselves either making more of those rapid impulsive decisions? Are we paralyzed in making decisions, feeling stuck, like we can't make any decisions at all? Emotions, are our emotions in check? Do we feel like it's difficult to self-regulate what we're feeling? Are we more irritable or more prone to bouts of sadness or anger, or any of the emotions in a more significant degree? And then things like self-care. So how are we doing with self-care? Self-care would be those things that we do to recharge our battery or to take care of our needs. And are we doing those things? And you may hear people talk about, it is a monumental task for me to want to get up out of the bed and put on clothes. Well, that would be an indicator, an assessment that, hey, we might be in that survival or burnout mode. So as you think about these different categories, just how they might rely or show up for us, I should say, when we're in one of these more negative energy places. So we can take, for example, here, walking into an event. So this is something that many of us have encountered at least once or 10 times in our life, is maybe we're walking to an event that we're unfamiliar. It could be a networking event, it could be an educational event, it could be a party at a friend's house with many people that we don't know, but we're walking into there. And as we're opening that door, we may have a variety of states going on for us. And I was going to just quickly run through on the next slide 3 of those states, right? So I should preface, you see a smoke detector here in the upper right-hand corner. We often like to think of our central nervous system as that internal smoke detector. It alerts us to danger, threat, and other necessary states. The challenge is, if you think about using a metaphor, we don't know with that smoke detector if there's a fire on the stove, like a skillet or something. Maybe there's a bit of a small fire, or if the whole house is on fire. We just know that danger, and our body moves into address that danger. So when we think about the 3 states of going into an event, walking in through the door, we might experience number 1, this connected and safe feeling. Like, okay, well, this is going to be an opportunity for social engagement. I'll connect with some people. It feels safe. I may not know everyone, but I may be able to move into that space and figure things out. So that would be an ideal state. Well, for many of us, we might encounter states 2 or 3. 2, more of that fight or flight. So we're walking through that door. We can already feel our heart rate increase. We can feel our breathing get more shallow. Cortisol, stress hormone, is just surging through our body with adrenaline. And we might find ourselves immediately scanning the room. We might be looking for the bar to go have a drink, at least have something in our hands as sort of an anchor. We might be immediately running to a table. We might be running to the restroom, just all kinds of different ways that we're just trying to immediately deal with this sense of this is uncomfortable or distressful. Or we might encounter number three, which is more of that state of immobilization, that frozen, that numbness. This idea that we might just stand in the corner and not engage with other people in the room. We might stand in the corner and immediately go nosedive into our phone and use that to sort of occupy or try to lower the stress level that we're experiencing. So we can encounter any of these three. We're all going to have these moments, absolutely. The challenge is there's a difference between more of that acute stressor versus a chronic stressor state. And so when we think about like chronic stressors, well, that could be things that we're encountering on an ongoing basis. Think about those things that might be even in your own current life. Well, when that's activated for a long time, it has multiple impacts. All those stress hormones are wearing down our mental health, leading to increased chance of anxiety, depression, perhaps other mental health concerns. Physical health, we know that it does a number to our cardiovascular systems. We know to our just multiple systems within our body when you're encountering that level of stress just start to break down. And then relationship health, again, those things like isolating or increased irritability can impact those relationships in the world around us. I think if we move. No. So what we wanted to do is present you with a few ideas on how to build that resilience. We know that the way things are in our current lives, there's a lot of amount of uncertainty, and we don't know when things will become more clear. So we wanted to come up with a few ideas and ways that we can build or strengthen that resilience in that time period. Yeah, so with this first grouping, changing your mindset. So the idea here, you'll see a few words, simplicity being at the top of the list. Simplicity is key. So when we think about the amount of choice in front of us, it could be the amount of choice in taking a different position in the field that we're in, the amount of choice in where we want to live, the amount of choice even in what we want to do for dinner. Choice can be amazing, but it can also stimulate this idea of immobilization. Paralysis by analysis is probably a phrase that you've often heard. And so when we're thinking about how to change that mindset, it's looking in the key here we often see in research is groups of three. So the real estate industry capitalizes on this, that location, location, location. Funny, but also it works. The idea of how do we focus on three things at a time. So if someone's looking for a position, it might be like, I'm going to focus on these three options for searching for jobs, or I'm going to focus on three things that I can do to change my current state. It's about simplicity. The second thing that can be really helpful with changing our mindset is labeling our thoughts. So the idea that we often subscribe to the notion that thoughts are facts. Well, thoughts are mental events, not necessarily facts. But if we buy into those thoughts and consider them facts, they can factor and create this really strong narrative for us. So a very quick and immediately impactful thing we can do is start to label our thoughts. So the idea, I'm anxious, looks and sounds a lot different than I'm having an anxious thought, or I'm noticing I'm having an anxious thought. It allows us to think about being more of a observer of those thoughts and feelings versus being more of the actor or participant in those thoughts or feelings. So labeling them can be an immediate and quick way to start to give us some distance. We often use this in conjunction with other strategies, and it can be very helpful.
I like in the past when you've equated that to going to a movie theater.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm anxious. That might be we're in the movie. I'm having an anxious thought. There's the label there. Would be more like we're sitting in the front row. And then I'm noticing I'm having the anxious thought is as if we were sitting in the back row of the theater. So it just gives us a bit more distance from the thought or feeling, more of a observer role than a participant role. And then finally on the screen, the why to what. So another quick, very accessible change that you can make is we so often form questions that start off with the word why. Why did you do that? Why did this have to happen to me? Why can't things be different? The challenge with the why is it tends to keep us past focused. We're looking back, and it tends to have a self-critical tone to it, either accusatory or self-critical. And so where we might encounter a why thought, the intervention is to change it to a what. So why did this have to happen to me? We'd observe that and then change it to what can I do about it now? What can I do about it moving forward? So again, it just changes the tense of the question and encourages us to be more present or future focused and finding new ways to be resilient in these times. I think on our next slide, unless Kim, you wanted to jump in.
No, I think I'm good.
Yeah. Okay. So the next grouping, being in the moment. So as I've got listed here, getting in the zone. So this is really about, you might hear flow state or being in the zone, and take for a moment and think about what activities might put you there. Some people might say sports. Some people might say like working out or yoga. Others might say a creative outlet, drawing, writing, painting. But the idea of being in the zone or having a flow state is being so absorbed, like almost completely absorbed by the task. That's a task that's engaging, that's enjoyable, that our attention is completely wrapped in it. And the idea of these states, they recharge us. They release dopamine, and that helps to invigorate us. That helps to bring about a sense of contentment, a sense of purpose. It activates different areas of the brain that encourage creativity, flexibility, new ways of thinking. And these zone states, they typically, some of the research says, we're probably about 90 minutes to 2 hours when we think about being in the zone with an activity, that it's harder to maintain that past that 2 hour point. And so just think about in those activities that may be in your world that allow you to access that. It's a great way to recharge our batteries.
Do you have a suggestion when someone feels kind of paralyzed, like they wake up and it's just like, oh, another day, to kind of get into a zone to bridge that?
Well, yeah, one of the things that is, will take some practice, but is the idea of, so sleep inertia. The research they've done says that when our alarm may go off or when we first wake up, if we get out of bed within the first 60 to 90 seconds, that our productivity, our mood, and again, thinking is vastly different than if we hit the snooze. And I'm hugely guilty of hitting the snooze. But what happens, that idea of sleep inertia, is when we're hitting snooze, we're prolonging some of those cycles and rhythms in our body. And so the idea of getting up and doing an activity in that first 60, 90 seconds can make a world of difference of setting your intention for the day. So that can be a way to move into finding that zone easier versus, hitting the snooze button or delaying the inevitable. And, some clients and individuals will talk about, they will, having a pet, having a dog can be a great way, because I need to get up and walk the dog, or I'm going to go set the coffee maker in the other room so that I physically have to get out of bed and I just can't roll over or just can't reach out and hit snooze on that, on the phone or the alarm clock, whatever device you may be using.
Yeah, I've seen, or I know a lot of people who, if you can any kind of task you don't want to do, if you'll just do it for 2 minutes, the likelihood of you sticking with it, your brain will get past it and you'll just kind of move forward. It's just that 2 minute period of just start it.
Mhm. And with that, so moving at the second category, glimmers, which might be an interesting word as we read it. So think about how we are typically hardwired for a negativity bias. We're very familiar with the word triggers, and thinking about those things that may trigger us or activate us to experience trauma or to experience intense feelings or thoughts or to experience negative states. And glimmers is different. Glimmers is about hardwiring us to look for things that are positive. So these would be things, could be everything from sunrise to time with an animal to other experiences, a rainbow, that help us to feel safe, calm, connected to the world. And the thought with this is that many people will journal, like have a list of glimmers that connect with them, because glimmers are not universal. And when they can, making sure that they engage in those glimmers. So in their notebook, they might have a list of 20 things, and on a daily basis, they're trying to engage with one of those or find an opportunity to engage with it. And again, the neurochemicals that come from that when we're looking for things that are positive in our world help to keep that sustainability in that in those difficult times.
What's yours?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I would almost say a sizzling plate of fajitas. I mean, it could be anything. Being a Texas boy, I like my Tex-Mex, so something that brings a little bit of joy there.
Fair
What's
enough.
yours?
Thunderstorms, hands down.
Thunderstorms.
Love thunderstorms. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And then the third phrase on here, radical acceptance. So I want to caveat it when we think about, so radical acceptance is this idea of letting go of the need to control, to judge situations. It's not about resignation. It's not about giving up. It's not about being approving of the situation. It's catching our shoulds, our musts. So life should look this way, or I must be doing blank. And the idea is like trying to move away from those phrases, the shoulds, the musts, and think about just how things are in that moment. And it's helpful to avoid labeling situations as good, bad, right, or wrong. Things are just is. Now, this practice takes practice, absolutely. And the idea is that we are just being in the moment, accepting things as they are, and still working to control what we can and to make changes where we can, but not getting trapped in unnecessarily in pain, which then that need to control the pain can bring about a sense of suffering that only prolongs or makes things more intense. So I definitely encourage reading some about it, getting some more information about it, but it can be a perspective shift that allows us to relate to situations differently, which then can help us to look for change or embrace change where it's possible.
Okay. I guess what I'm hearing is like the circumstances and situations are not, you don't have to label them right or wrong. They just are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's in a way, again, kind of going back with the labeling your thoughts or labeling your thoughts and feelings. It's a way to give you some distance. It's a way to see that this is the way things currently are. I'm not giving up. I'm not approving of the situation, but how can I see it differently so that I'm not stuck unnecessarily in that suffering? And with this third category, finding your passion. So a huge one is connecting with your values. Now, you probably hear values as a word that's thrown out a lot, but we're thinking about values as what really do we connect with? Values could look things like being outdoors. It could be citizenship or public service. It could be creativity. It could be family. It could be love. There's so many things. I was looking at a recent list that had come out, and there was over about 83 different values that people could look at as things that they might connect with. But this connecting with the values helps us to stay focused, keep the eyes on the prize. We might find a situation or where we want to move to is I really value the outdoors, or I value financial security. And so I'm going to make sure that I'm trying to find ways to connect and live to those values. And that's going to help me be in difficult situations and manage those feelings. A key component here would be to differentiate what do you really connect with internally as your values versus what you think you should value. There's things out there that may be more publicly ascribed to, or maybe what our family says that we should value, or what society says we should value. And we want to be really clear on what is it that we value. If we're buying into some other notion of what we should value, it's going to be harder to maintain that connection to it. It's going to feel more like a chore than something that we're leaning towards. And with that is engaging with your passion. Well, it's hard in difficult times and uncertain times. Trying to connect with our passion can be even more challenging, but really making sure that, one, identifying what we're passionate about, and two, how can we keep that alive for us? Passion and engaging in our passions, very recharging, very important for mental health. It can provide us a sense of purpose, a sense of fulfillment. So we want to make sure that that's out there. And so if we're struggling to find our passion, or if we're struggling to stay connected to our passion, even going back to our values and thinking about where those are showing up for us can be a great way to tap back into that passion. And then with the hope idea, so fostering hope. Now, what we do know is hope can be very powerful, and hope has 3 ingredients. So the first ingredient to hope is to have a goal. So what is the goal that I'm trying to move for? What is it, the goal that I hope for? The second ingredient of that is about possibility. So what is the possibility that that goal might happen? Now, the research that's out there says whether the likelihood is 90% or the likelihood is 10%, just the mere fact that you believe there is a possibility that your goal will happen is the key. And then the third one is a desire. So the desire, the wish to achieve that. It's a still very important ingredient. So we might have the first 2 ingredients. We have a goal and we know that it's possible, but if we don't feel that desire or that urge or connection to it, then it's harder to maintain that sense of hope. So ways to cultivate that desire can be just thinking about imagining what life would be like when that goal is achieved or when that hope is fulfilled. So getting ourselves to just think about it, to visualize it. That's where things like vision boards can be helpful for some individuals, because it gives them a way to tangibly visualize where they want to go in their lives.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Every leader I've ever read about or seen speak always talks about their visioning and how they visioned something years before and just constantly would see it in the environment and be like, that's the direction I'm supposed to be going. And that if they didn't envision it, they would never have gone anywhere. So it's pretty interesting.
So Kim, yeah, I know one of the big things about resilience, about maintaining hope, is a sense of community. We know that when we think about things and it's in terms of isolation, like I'm the only one going through this, or no one else understands, it's much harder to maintain that sense of hope, the sense of resilience. And so community is so key to that. And I was hoping maybe you could share a little bit more around that.
The community piece.
Yes.
I think what I've noticed is that if people have groups that they can meet with who understand what they're going through and who have kind of a common interest and they can support each other and actually be authentic and talk about the real things that are going on, it is incredibly helpful. Because I've noticed through work and through meeting people, especially since the strikes and even during COVID, that people get really isolated and then they feel like well, a lot of people didn't feel like they connect very well anymore after COVID. So like going out and just doing social stuff seemed to become harder for certain people. And then others, it was a little harder just to get back into the thick of things. And I mean, I don't know, do you go out as much as you used to, Shawn, before COVID, let's say?
It's definitely changed. It's
Mhm.
definitely, I think when you start to create new normals,
Mhm.
um, and fall out of patterns, well, then the momentum to re-engage with that can be challenging.
Yeah.
So, like you're talking about doing this task for 2 minutes, and perhaps after things get easier, I know that's what building new habits and lifestyle changes is that most difficult part in the beginning, where it's like, and that's where the staying in touch with your values, like social connections might be or community might be significant for someone, and it's like, okay, I know that's not showing up in my life right now. I can tell I'm not as fulfilled, or I'm not as feeling as energetic. How do I stay focused in fulfilling that value and staying on course?
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point too, is knowing about yourself. It's really easy to think you know who you are and then kind of not realize that you don't. A lot of the work I do a lot of the work that Shawn does will ask you like, what are your values? And it's sometimes very hard. Like it could each of you, in the chat, is it easy to write down 5 of your values? It kind of goes along with that envisioning piece. That's another thing that I found a lot of people have a hard time with. It's like, where are you going to be at the end of the year? And it's like, oh, I don't know. I don't really think about it. And that's where you kind of feel like you're drifting. But with values, like one of mine is exploring. And it's amazing once I labeled that, was like, I'm an explorer. That's important to me. When I get to the end of my life and look back, I want to be like, I explored as much as I could. And I have found that unbeknownst to me, that opportunities would come up and I'd shut them down because I'd be like, oh, it's not the right time. I shouldn't do that next week. I don't need to go there. And so even though I considered it a value, I never really upheld it as one. And now that I really pay attention to it, I had someone was just like, do you want to go to Ireland at the beginning of next year for a couple of months? And I was just like, I can't do that. And then I was like, wait a minute, am I explorer or am I not one? Here's my opportunity on a silver platter. It's the universe being like, this is what you say you are. So I think seeing those things and labeling them and kind of figuring out as much as you can who you are right now is really helpful, because then you're looking for it in your environment, and it's that thing where, you buy a red car and then every car is that make and model and red everywhere you go. It's just like when you're looking for things, you're going to find them. So it's paying attention to what you're looking for and making sure it's purposeful. And, we all get up and don't want to do things. And it's just like, okay, 2 minutes. For 2 minutes, I'm just going to start it and it go as long as I can. And it's surprising how much you can really dive into something. That meandered a bit. I think I answered your question somewhat.
You did absolutely.
Community is important, and knowing who you are in that community is important.
Yeah, knowing who you are, and there's a big difference. Brene Brown is a great author. Some of you may be familiar or may be interested, but that idea of belonging versus fitting in, and the idea of like being true to your authentic self and finding that belonging within versus just trying to fit in with a group where the external is dictating how you should be.
Yeah.
Speaking of connecting with values, I'm going to flip it over to you to handle the rest of the call and go connect with one of mine. I think there'll be a QR code at the end. So if anyone's curious or wants a list of those values or some exercise to help explore that further, please reach out. And I will leave it to you, Kim.
Thanks, Shawn. I appreciate it.
All right,
Have
thanks.
a good one. I'm looking at, sorry, now I'm jumping in and looking at the chat. So yeah, Raul, you brought up community. Is there anything else? I don't know if you guys want to come on and talk for a couple of minutes before we wrap up of just what you feel like the community is looking for right now, and like how this may or may not have touched some of that. Phil, it looks like you're not on mute. No, I can't hear you guys if you're talking. Well, I guess with that, then I will go ahead and wrap because I don't see any other questions on here. Let me check one more time. Sorry. Just making sure it's caught up. Okay, well, I think that's it because no one else is putting anything on there. Well, we appreciate everyone attending today, and the QR code will take you to a very, very short survey, and then it'll talk about some upcoming events that we have going on. And there's a very, very short survey we'd really appreciate for you to take if you have time. And if you have any follow-up questions or want to do a coaching session, we'd be happy to do that with you. And again, thank you to the BCPC for hosting us today. And we look forward to hopefully doing something again in the future.